In the blinding heart of the blizzard, Elowen Sinclair stumbled through knee-deep snow, her lungs burning, as the impossible voice of a man pleading for help rang out impossibly close behind her, closer than physics allowed, closer than any living soul could move in this frozen hell. The wrecked plow loomed ahead, headlights piercing the white like dying eyes, engine humming, cab empty, no tracks leading away. She refused to turn, refused to look, sprinting toward the faint glow of her friend's porch light, heart hammering with the certainty that whatever haunted these roads had marked her next. If this pulse-pounding moment of dread has you gripped, subscribe now. The revelations that follow will leave you questioning every shadow in the snow. The storm had come like a thief in the night, burying the back roads of northern Ontario under a merciless white tide. Elowen Sinclair, 20 and stubbornly restless, stood at her cottage window and watched the world disappear one flake at a time. The power flickered again, lights dimming before surrendering to darkness altogether. Her phone lay useless on the table, no signal, no Wi-Fi, no distraction left to dull the quiet. The radio had gone silent hours ago. Even the wind seemed to pause between gusts, as if the storm were listening. Boredom gnawed at her worse than the cold. She hadn't planned to be alone out here this long. The cottage was supposed to be a short escape, a reset before the weight of real life pressed in again. Instead, the storm had sealed her in, stretching the hours into something heavy and airless. The walls felt closer now. Too quiet. Too still. Her thoughts drifted, inevitably, to Callum Reed. Callum, with his grease-stained hands and crooked smile. Callum, who'd grown up 2 houses down from her parents' place, who still fixed engines in the next township like he always said he would. They didn't talk as much as they used to, but when they did, it felt easy, unchanged in a way that made everything else seem too loud by comparison. 1.5 miles. That was all that separated them. In normal weather, it was nothing. A brisk walk. Tonight, it was ridiculous. Dangerous, even. Every sensible voice in her head told her to stay put, to light a candle and wait the storm out like a responsible adult. But another voice, quieter, sharper, whispered something else. What if? The idea sparked like mischief, warming her chest despite the cold seeping through the window. She imagined Callum opening his door to find her there, snow-dusted and breathless, grinning like she used to when they skipped school just because they could. The thought made her laugh out loud, the sound strange and bright in the empty cottage. Decision made. She dressed quickly, layering up with the kind of care that came from growing up with winters like these. Parka zipped to her chin. Thick scarf wrapped twice. Wool hat tugged low. Boots laced tight. She hesitated only once, hand on the door, listening to the wind howl its warning. Then she stepped outside. The cold hit her instantly, sharp and clean, stealing her breath before she found her rhythm again. Snow crunched beneath her boots, fresh and untouched, each step leaving a clear imprint that the storm was already trying to erase. Streetlights cast soft golden halos, the flakes spinning lazily through them like something out of a dream. For the first half-mile, it felt almost magical. The road lay hushed and white, familiar shapes softened by snow. Elowen walked carefully but confidently, her breath puffing out in steady clouds. She felt lighter with every step, as though movement itself was thawing something inside her that had been frozen too long. The storm didn't seem so threatening out here, just vast and alive. Then the road narrowed. Houses thinned until there were none at all, their warm windows replaced by dense walls of pine and birch. The trees leaned inward, branches heavy with snow, forming a corridor that swallowed the light. The street lamps ended abruptly, leaving only the pale glow of the overcast sky to guide her. The silence deepened. It pressed in on her ears, broken only by the crunch of her boots and the low, restless moan of the wind weaving through the trees. Her confidence faltered. She slowed, heart ticking a little faster now, suddenly aware of how small she was out here. The snow fell harder, flakes stinging her cheeks, blurring the path ahead. She told herself it was fine. She'd walked this road 100 times before. She knew every bend, every dip. Still, the storm had a way of changing things, of hiding landmarks beneath a seamless white blanket. The world felt unfamiliar now, like it had quietly rearranged itself while she wasn't looking. A gust of wind surged through the trees, sending a shiver down her spine. Branches creaked overhead, shedding snow in soft avalanches that thudded to the ground around her. Elowen tightened her scarf and pushed on, refusing to turn back. The thought of retreat felt heavier than the cold. Halfway through the wooded stretch, she paused. Not because she wanted to, but because something about the silence had shifted. The wind fell away, leaving behind an eerie stillness that made her skin prickle. She held her breath, listening. For a moment, there was nothing at all. Then she heard it. A sound, not quite a voice, not quite the wind, carried faintly through the trees. Elowen's pulse quickened. She turned slowly, scanning the darkness between the trunks. Her rational mind scrambled for explanations, branches rubbing together, the storm playing tricks on her ears. Still, unease settled in her chest. She forced a breath, steadying herself. "Get it together," she muttered, the words muffled by her scarf. Fear had a way of feeding on silence, she reminded herself. The sooner she reached Callum's place, the sooner this would all become a story they laughed about over hot coffee. She took another step. The snow beneath her boot shifted unexpectedly, her foot sinking deeper than she'd anticipated. She stumbled, arms flailing before she caught herself, heart slamming against her ribs. The storm seemed to close in at once, wind roaring back to life as if amused by her misstep. Elowen straightened, adrenaline surging now. The thrill that had fueled her earlier excitement sharpened into something else, something more dangerous, more alive. She was committed. Turning back now felt impossible. Ahead, the trees thinned again. Through the curtain of falling snow, she thought she saw a faint glow in the distance, warm, amber, unmistakably human. Relief flooded her so fast it almost made her dizzy. Callum's place. She laughed softly, the sound shaky but genuine, and pushed forward with renewed determination. The storm howled behind her, but Elowen didn't look back. Not yet. What would you do if boredom pushed you into the storm? Drop a comment below. What small risk have you taken just to feel alive? Elowen had returned to this quiet corner of the province with the naive hope that familiarity could stitch together what the city had unraveled. Toronto had promised momentum, exposure, a future bright enough to drown out doubt. Instead, art school left her hollowed in ways she hadn't expected, critiques that sharpened insecurity, friendships that dissolved once semesters ended, and a constant pressure to be louder, bolder, more marketable than she knew how to be. When the noise became unbearable, she packed her life into 2 suitcases and came home, telling herself it was temporary. The town greeted her politely, but without warmth. Nothing had changed, and that was the problem. The same diner with the cracked vinyl booths. The same hardware store with the bell that jingled too loudly when you entered. Faces she recognized but no longer knew. People asked how Toronto was, nodded at her answers, then moved on. Her parents' house felt crowded with memories she wasn't ready to unpack, so the cottage became her refuge, quiet, isolated, safe. Too safe. Friends she'd grown up with were scattered now, pulled away by work, marriage, or cities that still believed in them. Group chats went silent. Promises to visit softened into vague maybes. Callum remained the one constant thread, never dramatic, never demanding, just there. He didn't ask why she'd come back or what had gone wrong. He listened. Fixed her car when it rattled. Remembered how she took her coffee. The last anchor. She spent her days sketching, filling page after page with winter scenes that mirrored her mood more than the landscape outside. Snow-heavy forests. Empty roads. Small figures swallowed by white space. Her instructors once told her restraint was her strength. Now it felt like a confession she couldn't stop making. She never drew crowds. Never faces clearly. Always distance. Always quiet. Loneliness has a way of disguising itself as calm. That night, as the storm sealed her off from the world, the ache she usually kept contained began to press harder. The cottage, once comforting, felt like a box. The silence grew accusatory. Every unfinished sketch stared back at her like proof she was standing still while everyone else moved on. So the walk became something else entirely. Not recklessness. Not stupidity. Defiance. Defiance against the idea that this was it. That she would shrink herself to fit the town's expectations, wait patiently for something to change, accept a life measured in small, careful steps. Stepping into the storm was her way of pushing back, of reminding herself she could still choose movement over stagnation. Each step through the snow carried that quiet rebellion. As she walked, memories surfaced uninvited, summers biking with Callum along these same roads, sneaking into the quarry at dusk, believing the world was wide and waiting. Back then, the town hadn't felt like an ending. It had been a starting point. Somewhere along the way, that belief had eroded. The storm didn't scare her as much as it probably should have. It demanded attention, presence. Her thoughts narrowed to breath and footing, to the feel of cold biting her cheeks. For once, there was no room for regret or comparison. Just now. Just forward. She imagined Callum's reaction when she arrived, surprise first, then concern, then that familiar half-smile he tried to hide when he was relieved. The image steadied her. It wasn't romance she craved, not exactly. It was connection. Proof she still mattered somewhere. Her sketchbook weighed heavy in her backpack, pages blank tonight. Maybe she'd draw later, capture the way the storm erased edges, how light struggled through snowfall. Or maybe she wouldn't draw at all. Maybe this walk itself was the art, a line drawn boldly through the quiet of her life. The wind rose again, sharper now, tugging at her coat like a warning. Elowen leaned into it, jaw set, boots finding their rhythm. She wasn't running from loneliness anymore. She was walking straight through it. And whatever waited at the end of this road, warmth, regret, or something she hadn't yet imagined, at least it would be chosen. Halfway down the road, the darkness ahead shifted. At first, Elowen thought it was the storm playing tricks on her eyes, a pale blur moving against the white. Then the light sharpened, resolving into twin beams cutting slowly through the snowfall. Headlights. Yellowed, utilitarian. A snow plow, blade raised, crawling forward with cautious determination. Relief flickered through her. Proof of life. Proof the world hadn't completely shut down. She stepped off to the side of the road, lifting an arm instinctively, though the driver was still too far away to see her clearly. The machine rumbled closer, engine straining, tires chewing through the drifts. It moved oddly slow, almost hesitant, as if the driver were fighting more than just snow. Then it lurched. The plow jerked sharply to the right, headlights swinging wild for a split second. Elowen heard the unmistakable whine of tires spinning uselessly, the engine revving in protest. The blade clipped something unseen beneath the snow, and the entire vehicle slid sideways, momentum carrying it off the road. There was a dull, sickening crunch. The lights vanished into the tree line, swallowed by branches and shadow. Snow billowed up in a thick plume, and then, nothing. No engine roar. No horn. Just the storm rushing back in to fill the silence. Elowen froze. Her mind scrambled, trying to make sense of what she'd just seen. A dozen thoughts collided at once. Maybe it stopped safely. Maybe the driver's fine. Maybe help is already on the way. But the quiet that followed felt wrong. Too complete. Too final. Someone could be hurt. The realization hit her with sudden clarity, burning away hesitation. Fear twisted in her chest, but it was eclipsed by something stronger, purpose. She couldn't just stand there. Not now. Not after seeing that. She broke into a run. It was awkward and clumsy, boots plunging deep into the snow with every step. The drifts fought her, stealing her balance, forcing her to lurch forward again and again. Her lungs burned as she sucked in cold air, breath tearing from her throat in sharp gasps. Snow stung her face, lashes clumping with ice, but she didn't slow. Branches whipped at her coat as she pushed toward where the headlights had disappeared. The trees loomed close now, their trunks dark and unforgiving. Somewhere ahead, half hidden by snow and shadow, the plow lay silent. "Hello?" she shouted, her voice thin against the wind. "Is anyone there?" The storm swallowed her words whole. Her heart pounded, not just from exertion now, but urgency. Each step felt heavier, the forest pressing in, visibility shrinking to only a few feet ahead. She slipped once, hands plunging into powder as she caught herself, panic flaring hot and sudden. "Get up," she told herself fiercely. "Keep moving." She reached the edge of the road and scrambled down the shallow embankment, boots sliding on packed snow. There, through the trees, she caught a glimpse of metal. The plow sat at an angle, nose buried against a cluster of young pines, one headlight cracked, the other flickering weakly. "Hey!" Elowen called again, louder now. "I saw you crash." She approached cautiously, every nerve on edge. The engine was off. Snow already clung to the hood in thick layers, the storm reclaiming the scene with ruthless speed. She circled toward the driver's side, pulse thundering in her ears. The cab door stood slightly ajar. A wash of cold fear slid down her spine. She reached out, gloved hand trembling as she knocked on the metal. "Hello?" she said again, softer this time. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was only the wind and the creak of trees bending under snow. Then, movement. A faint sound from inside the cab, indistinct but human. Relief surged through her so hard it made her dizzy. She leaned closer, bracing herself against the doorframe. "I'm here," she said quickly, voice steadier than she felt. "You're not alone. I'll help." As the storm howled around them, Elowen realized something with startling certainty. This walk had stopped being about boredom, or defiance, or proving anything to herself. It was about staying. And whatever came next, she was already too far in to turn back. The tire tracks carved a jagged path through the snow, dark grooves twisting away from the road and plunging into the trees. Elowen followed them, heart hammering, boots slipping as the ground dipped sharply. The storm seemed to hush around the wreck, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. The Plow sat crumpled against a thick pine, its metal flank bent inward, blade half buried beneath packed snow. One headlight blazed too bright, the other flickered weakly, casting erratic shadows that leapt across the trunks. The engine still rumbled, low and uneven, a mechanical growl that felt wrong in the quiet woods. "Hello," Elowen called, her voice barely carrying. No answer. She approached the cab, breath fogging the glass as she leaned closer to peer inside. The driver's seat was empty. No slumped figure. No movement. The steering wheel tilted at an odd angle, dusted with snow blown in through the open door. She checked the passenger side next, circling the vehicle carefully, every sense alert. Empty. Her pulse spiked. She scanned the ground instinctively, searching for signs of someone climbing out in a hurry. Footprints. Drag marks. Anything. But the snow lay smooth and untouched, a pristine white blanket stretching in every direction. Even near the open door, there were no impressions, no scuffs, no broken crust, nothing to suggest a human presence had disturbed it. That wasn't possible. Her mind raced, grasping for explanations. Maybe the wind had already filled them in. Maybe she was missing something obvious. She crouched, brushing snow aside with her glove, but beneath it the surface was firm and unbroken. The storm hadn't erased tracks here. It hadn't had time. A shiver crawled up her spine, sharper than the cold. The open door creaked softly as the wind nudged it, the sound slow and deliberate. Elowen straightened, suddenly aware of how exposed she was, how small her circle of light felt against the dark forest pressing in. The engine's rumble faltered for a moment, then steadied again, like a pulse refusing to fade. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Think. Someone had been driving this Plow minutes ago. She had seen it veer off the road. Seen it disappear. And yet there was no sign of where the driver had gone. No trail leading away. No blood. No panic frozen into the snow. Just absence." The cold seemed to deepen, seeping through her layers until it settled in her bones. The wind threaded through the trees, whispering softly, almost conversationally, and Elowen had the unsettling sense that it carried something beneath the sound, an undercurrent of movement she couldn't quite place. She turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Shadows shifted as branches swayed, snow sliding down in quiet cascades. Every dark gap between trunks looked suddenly like a doorway. She fought the urge to retreat, reminding herself that fear could invent patterns where none existed. Still, her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Very wrong. She stepped back toward the plow, keeping it at her side like a shield. The headlight glare caught her eye again, illuminating the snow just beyond the wreck. For a brief, dizzying second, she thought she saw a disturbance, a faint indentation, a ripple in the white. She blinked. It was gone. The forest fell silent once more, the wind easing as if it had never spoken at all. Elowen stood alone beside the idling machine, the storm closing ranks behind her, and realized with a slow, sinking certainty that this wasn't an accident waiting to be solved. It was a mystery that had noticed her. And it wasn't finished yet. The voice came out of nowhere. "Help me." It was male. Hoarse. Desperate. Close enough that Elowen felt it in her chest before she processed the sound itself. She spun around, boots skidding in the snow, heart lurching so violently it stole her breath. Nothing. The trees stood exactly as they had a moment ago, dark trunks, heavy branches, snow drifting lazily through the gaps. No figure breaking through the drifts. No movement. No sign of anyone at all. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Hello?" she called, hating how small her voice sounded now. The wind stirred, lifting loose snow into the air. For a split second, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. Stress, adrenaline, the storm playing tricks on her senses. Then it came again. "Help me." Closer. Too close. Elowen's stomach dropped. The sound hadn't traveled through the forest the way voices normally did. It hadn't echoed or thinned. It was as if someone had spoken directly into the space behind her, bypassing distance altogether. Impossible. No one could have crossed that ground so fast. She would have seen them. Heard them crashing through the snow. Felt the vibration of footsteps. But the snow around her remained untouched, smooth as untouched canvas. Her instinct screamed, sharp and undeniable. Run. Every part of her body tensed at once, muscles coiling for movement. She backed away from the plow, eyes darting between the trees, trying to spot the source of the voice. The headlight glare felt suddenly blinding, leaving the darkness beyond it thicker, more threatening. "Please," the voice said again, but now it sounded wrong. Not farther. Not nearer. Everywhere. It wove through the forest, slipping between branches and wind, overlapping itself just enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. The desperation felt real, raw enough to hook into her empathy, but something beneath it rang hollow, like an imitation practiced too many times. Her breath came fast and shallow. "Don't think. Move." She turned and ran. Snow dragged at her legs, stealing speed, but panic lent her strength. She barreled through the trees, branches clawing at her coat, breath burning her lungs. Behind her, the forest answered with sound, snow shifting, wind rising, something pacing her just out of sight. "Help me," the voice cried again, now almost pleading. She didn't look back. The world narrowed to white and shadow, to the frantic rhythm of her heartbeat and the desperate need to put distance between herself and whatever was hunting her through the storm. The road felt impossibly far away, the plow's lights already swallowed by darkness. Her foot caught on a buried root and she stumbled, hands plunging into the snow as she barely caught herself from falling flat. Terror surged, hot and electric. She scrambled upright, spinning once more despite herself. Still nothing. But the silence now felt intentional, as though something had learned the value of waiting. Elowen ran harder, fear sharpening her thoughts into a single, brutal truth. The storm wasn't the most dangerous thing out here. And whatever had called her name had done so because it knew she would listen. But her body didn't believe that. Her legs burned, muscles screaming as they fought through waist-deep drifts. Each step felt heavier than the last, snow grabbing at her boots like hands. The road should have been just ahead, she knew its curve, the way it bent left before straightening out, but everything looked wrong now. Familiar landmarks dissolved into white blur and shadow. The storm thickened, flakes blinding, wind roaring back to life with cruel timing. "Please," the voice said again. It sounded closer still. Not behind her anymore. Beside her. A sob clawed up her throat. She veered instinctively, heart slamming so hard it hurt, nearly losing her footing as the ground dipped unexpectedly. Her vision tunneled, edges darkening. The cold gnawed deep now, no longer sharp but numbing, insidious. "Don't stop. Don't stop." Her lungs felt too small, air scraping like glass. Every inhale came with the fear that the next one wouldn't. Panic dissolved her sense of distance. She couldn't tell if she'd been running for seconds or minutes. The road refused to appear. The forest seemed endless, rearranging itself with every frantic glance. The voice changed. Still desperate, but layered now, stretched thin, as though more than one throat tried to speak at once. The sound crawled over her skin, setting her teeth on edge. "Elowen." She nearly fell. Her name landed like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her chest. She hadn't said it. Hadn't shouted it. No one here should know it. Her thoughts spiraled wildly, grasping at reason even as terror devoured it. "I'm imagining this. I have to be." She ran harder, ignoring the agony in her legs, the stitch tearing at her side. Tears froze on her lashes, vision blurring further. The world became motion and fear, the relentless drive forward fueled by the certainty that stopping meant something far worse than exhaustion. At last, through the whiteout, she saw it. The road. A darker ribbon cutting through the snow, barely visible but unmistakable. Relief hit so hard her knees nearly buckled. She stumbled toward it, dragging herself up onto the packed surface, boots slipping on ice. She didn't slow. The voice followed her onto the road, drifting now from the trees, from the wind, from nowhere at all. "Help me." Her legs trembled violently, threatening to give out. Every nerve screamed for rest, for shelter, for safety. But terror kept her upright, kept her moving, one staggering step after another. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. And the voice stayed with her, close enough to feel its breath, close enough that doubt crept in alongside fear. What if it was real? What if stopping meant leaving someone to die? The thought almost broke her. But instinct, older, colder, merciless, overrode it. She ran on, terror absolute, knowing with awful clarity that whatever followed her did not want saving. It wanted her to stop. Callum's porch light appeared through the storm like a promise. It cut through the whiteout in a soft amber glow, steady and real, and the sight of it shattered whatever strength Elowen had left. She stumbled up the last stretch of driveway, boots sliding on packed snow, fingers numb and useless as she reached for the railing. Her legs buckled before she could knock. She collapsed at the door. The sound of her body hitting the wooden boards was swallowed by the wind, but not entirely. Somewhere inside, a chair scraped back. Footsteps rushed closer. The door flew open, warmth spilling out in a wave that made her gasp like she'd surfaced from deep water. Elowen? Callum's voice cracked with disbelief and fear. He dropped to his knees beside her without hesitation, hands firm on her shoulders, grounding her. Snow clung to her hair and lashes, her coat soaked through, breath coming in ragged, broken pulls. Her teeth chattered violently. The words tangled, refused to line up. I ran. The plow. There was. Hey, he said quickly, pulling her inside. You're safe. You're home. You're okay. Warmth closed around her as Callum's parents appeared, moving with quiet urgency born of long winters and practiced care. Someone shut the door against the storm. Someone else took her coat. A blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, another around her legs. The world slowed, edges softening as the cold released its grip inch by inch. They sat her at the kitchen table, steam rising from a mug pressed into her trembling hands. The house hummed gently, furnace kicking on, kettle whistling low, the reassuring creak of a place that had weathered storms before. When her breathing finally steadied, they listened. Not with skepticism. Not with interruption. They let her speak in fragments at first, then in halting sentences as her voice returned to her. She told them about the plow sliding off the road. The empty cab. The open door. The voice in the trees. How it had followed her, how it had known her name. Silence settled when she finished. Callum's mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand, her grip warm and sure. You were terrified, she said simply. Not a question. A statement. Callum nodded, jaw tight, eyes never leaving Elowen's face. I've never seen you like that, he added. You wouldn't make this up. They didn't argue details. They didn't press her to explain the impossible parts. They didn't dismiss the fear just because the story bent the edges of reason. What mattered to them was what they could see, the way her hands still shook, the raw panic etched into her expression, the exhaustion pulling her shoulders inward. Courage flickered in that quiet kitchen, not the loud kind, not the heroic sort, but something steadier. Belief in her fear, even if not yet in the tale. Callum walked her to the couch and tucked the blanket tighter around her, kneeling in front of her so their eyes met. You're not alone, he said softly. Whatever happened out there, we'll deal with it in the morning. Outside, the storm raged on, battering the windows, howling its secrets into the night. Inside, warmth held. And for the first time since she'd stepped into the snow, Elowen let herself believe she might survive what followed, not because the danger had passed, but because someone else now carried the weight of knowing. The police arrived just before dawn, when the storm had finally exhausted itself and the world lay hushed beneath a fresh, unbroken sheet of snow. Red and blue lights washed silently over Callum's driveway, muted by drifting flakes. Elowen watched from the living room window, blanket still wrapped tight around her shoulders, stomach knotted as two officers stepped out of the cruiser. They moved with careful efficiency, boots crunching softly, breath fogging in the cold air. She told the story again. This time slower. Clearer. They listened with professional distance, jotting notes as she described the plow, the crash, the empty cab, the voice that had followed her through the trees. When she finished, they exchanged a glance that landed like a quiet verdict. They went out to look. Callum insisted on following them down the road, Elowen trailing behind despite the ache in her legs. Daylight stripped the forest of some of its menace, revealing snow-laden branches and smooth, undisturbed ground. The road curved gently where she remembered it. The tree lean stood intact. No bent pine. No gouged earth. No tire tracks cutting into the drifts. Nothing. Where the plow should have been, there was only pristine snow, unmarked and absolute. Even the roadside ditch lay smooth, as though no vehicle had ever left the road at all. One officer knelt, brushing snow aside with a gloved hand. He shook his head slowly. No tracks, he said. No debris. No sign of a crash. The words hollowed her out. Back at the house, they asked their questions more pointedly now. Had she been drinking? Was she on medication? Was she under stress? Had she slept recently? The storm, they explained gently, could disorient people. Fear could do strange things to perception. Stories like this happen more often than folks like to admit. It's possible you imagined parts of it, one officer said, not unkindly. The mind fills gaps when it's overwhelmed. Imagined. The word stung more than outright disbelief. Elowen felt heat rise in her chest, a familiar instinct to shrink, to soften the edges of her truth so it would be easier for others to swallow. She'd done it before, in critiques, in conversations, in rooms where certainty was mistaken for arrogance. Not this time. She straightened, pulling the blanket closer not for comfort, but resolve. Her voice surprised even her, steady, unshaking. I know the difference between fear and imagination, she said. I know what I saw. And I know what I heard. The officers paused, pens hovering. I'm not asking you to explain it, she continued, meeting their eyes one by one. I'm telling you it happened. Whether there's evidence left or not doesn't change that. Silence followed, heavier than accusation. They left shortly after, polite but unconvinced, their assurances careful and conditional. If anything else happened, they said. If she remembered more details. If there were witnesses. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Elowen exhaled slowly. Callum sat beside her, not speaking, just there. His presence mattered more than agreement. Outside, the morning light brightened the snow until it glittered painfully, innocent and untouched. The forest looked ordinary again. But Elowen knew better. In the retelling, in refusing to soften her words or apologize for them, she felt something shift. The fear hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned her. Whatever had followed her through the storm had not taken her voice. And that, she realized, mattered. Because if it came again, if the silence tried to swallow her story the way the snow had swallowed the road, she would speak. Loud enough. Clear enough. And this time, she would not stand alone.